I know that my mother, for example, was not very happy that I had the Quran, the New Testament, the Bhagavad Gita in my bedroom. And
At which age? 15, 16?
yeah, in sort of my late teenage. And I told her that she should be more concerned that I have Kant and Schopenhauer and Nietzsche. The difference between the theist and the mystic in this context is the theist says there is a God, there is one God. And the mystic says there is nothing but God. Ein od milvado. There is nothing, everything that you see is only God. And that's a beautiful question, because it now opens up a new conversation of not who's better than one another and who has the truth and are they going to hell. These are childish questions as far as I'm concerned. The modern notion of secularism and atheism is part of a great tikkun, part of a great rectification that religion itself needs to go through to come to its own truth, to move away from a discourse of coercion, of forcing, of hegemony, of power, to one of freedom and choice and a liberated form of religion. I think in today's day and age, people are chasing the mystical experience. Everyone wants a fun experience, something they can share on Instagram. They want to, have a unique experience. And the mystics actually say, don't be chasing experience. You're making a mistake, because we can become junkies with experience. And I think it's really not so important.
Hi to everyone. The introduction is going to be Spanish, but the whole conversation is going to be in English, so don't worry. Hola a todo el mundo, bienvenidos al canal de Tikkun Olam. Yo soy Isaac Lev y hoy tenemos el mérito y el placer de entrevistar a Zevi Slavin, un experto en mística judía y también con la relación que mantiene con el resto de tradiciones místicas de todo el mundo. Zevi Slavin, para quien no lo conozca, es un joven judío que nació y creció en Australia en el seno de una comunidad judía ortodoxa jasídica. Eventualmente él recibió la smicha, que es la formación rabínica. A una edad muy temprana, Zevi me contó que él se enamoró de la mística judía y ese amor creció y se expandió al resto de tradiciones místicas de todo el mundo. Desde entonces él enseña y él estudia filosofía mística en centros filosóficos, académicos y religiosos de todo el mundo. Por ello es que Zevi ha creado el canal, el proyecto llamado Secrets of Unity, Buscadores de la Unidad en español, que es un proyecto educacional, así como una comunidad que tiene el objetivo de realizar una exploración comparativa, interdisciplinaria, entre todas las diferentes tradiciones místicas, buscando la unidad que subyace a todas las tradiciones místicas del mundo, así como una intersección, la búsqueda de la intersección entre la filosofía y el misticismo, tanto en Oriente como en Occidente, en el pasado, la antigüedad y hoy en día. Para los que les interese más del proyecto de Zevi, de Secrets of Unity, los buscadores de la unidad, tenéis en el enlace de la descripción un enlace a su canal de YouTube. Y ahora sí, empecemos. So, thank you very much, Zevi, for being here in the channel, for talking with us.
My pleasure. Good to be here with you.
I think, like, the first time actually that I saw a video of yours, it really shocked me in a positive way, because I saw so much knowledge, but not only like religious knowledge or spiritual knowledge, mystic knowledge, like also academic, analytical, very intellectual. And I think it's very difficult to be able to speak with someone who has this expertise also in mysticism and also in philosophy and academic knowledge. So thank you very much. I hope we can discuss a little bit of these ideas here in the channel. So the first question I wanted to ask you is, like, you fell in love with Jewish mysticism and at a very early age. And I wanted to ask you, when did this happen and why? What happened with Jewish mysticism that you fell in love? And also, how did that lead you to fall in love with the broader mysticism of all the traditions of the world?
It's a great question. It's good to start with love, because ultimately it's a project of love, right? And the mystics, at the core of the mysticism, I think, is a love that's driving them. So love is a very good place to start, and I appreciate the question. I think that we think that mysticism happens in books and in universities and in interviews, but really mysticism happens in embodied communities, in a community of people practicing and living according to the values and aspirations of a mystical tradition. At least that's how it's been done historically. I had the great advantage and the great fortune of growing up inside a living Hasidic community, which, for those that don't know, Hasidism is a contemporary form of Jewish mysticism, simply put. Begins in the 18th century with the Baal Shem Tov, a great mystic, and continues until today. And I, by whatever lucky chance, I was lucky enough to be born into a family where Hasidic mysticism was not just being studied or spoken about or theorized, it was being lived. So I was exposed to Hasidut, to Jewish mysticism, from really as early as the day I was born, because the Hasidic lifestyle really enwraps the entire experience of the human. So the way that the parents raise a child within the Hasidic community is built on the values of kindness and love that we get from Hasidut. So, and I felt that love. I felt that love from a very early age, and I didn't understand what it was in a broader historical context or broader metaphysical context of what was being taught to me or what I was being exposed to, but I certainly felt that love. And I was fortunate enough to have a few very good teachers throughout my education that were able to bring these ideas of Hasidut, of Jewish mysticism, contemporary mysticism, which can be quite lofty and abstract and esoteric, and to communicate them in a way that made me very excited as a young boy, as an adolescent, and then as a young man, to begin to explore and to begin to unpack and to begin to dive into.
In the yeshiva you're talking about?
Yeah, even before yeshiva, I would say even from kindergarten and primary school and high school all the way through to yeshiva. I think that training begins at a very young age. It's because...
So you're saying like in kindergarten they're teaching like mysticism, modern mysticism?
Yes, I think so. It's not that they're bringing, a copy of the Zohar and they're saying this is where Shimon Bar Yochai said this one, but there's a certain way of being. A certain mysticism is an existential disposition. It's a mode of being. It's a way which we approach life and reality itself. And the fundamental principles that the Baal Shem Tov teaches that become the heart of Hasidut, for example, that Einod Milvado, that there's nothing but the divine. Everything that we encounter is divine in some sense. Or more psychological ideas that come through the Chabad tradition, like Tracht gut sein Gott, that if you set a positive mindset, then our interpretation of reality will be positive and therefore will create a positive reality.
Can I say it again in Hebrew?
It's Yiddish, actually.
Yiddish, okay.
Tracht gut sein gut, which means think good and it will be good.
Oh, okay.
I think that these are ideas which have become popularized, right? Mm-hmm. Part of the Hasidic movement is a popularization of mysticism. Sometimes that's a dirty word for people, but I don't think it has to be a dirty word. It's also important to reach the populace. Mm-hmm. And these are ideas which are a popularization of mysticism, of really core mystical ideas and ways of being. So I think that even in kindergarten, the approach that we have to Torah mitzvot, to the commandments in Judaism, the approach that we have to acts of kindness, gemilut chasadim, I think these are all very deeply inspired by and dictated in some sense by the mysticism of the Hasidic tradition, and in my case by Chabad Hasidism in specific. Mm-hmm. So that was really the world that I grew up in. I grew up in a world which was incubated and surrounded by, it was an enchanted world of mysticism. There's, I think it's Max Weber's theory that we live in a disenchanted universe. I didn't grow up in I grew up in a very enchanted universe where the presence of God was very felt, where the presence of love and kindness was very much placed at a premium. Somewhere in my teenage years, and to be clear, to me this was not taught in a comparative way. It wasn't taught as one of many mystical traditions. It was taught as the reality. This is the truth. This is the truth that we've been taught, that our parents were taught, that they were taught. And it wasn't given within a broader historical context. There's something about contemporary orthodoxy which is somewhat synchronic in its presentation of time, that revelation is now, creation is now, redemption is now. As I began to, even Jewish history is not taught so much in Orthodox, or in let's say, ultra-Orthodox circles. As I began to...
I'm sorry, to Orthodox?
Well, these labels are, they're a bit more for sociologists than for practitioners. And to me, ultra-Orthodox always reminds me of like a laundry detergent company, right? It's like, are you ultra, like ultra white? To me, but generally speaking, Hasidut and Hasidism as a social movement in a contemporary atmosphere is generally seen by sociologists as being ultra-Orthodox, as belonging to the world of Haredi, as it's known in Hebrew. These are labels, and each of us as individuals, we transcend the labels, but it helps to have a bit of a framework. When I was about, I think maybe 16 or 17, I used to read a lot. I was a very quiet child, and I liked reading. My best friends were people that had been dead for a long time. And I was reading a book, And in the book, there was a popularization of forms of mysticism, Christian mysticism, and then a bit later, Islamic mysticism. And to me, it was very bizarre to encounter these ideas from a totally non-Jewish, public, popular author. To me, I thought that we were the only ones that had mysticism. We had Hasidut. And I was curious, how did this author know what I had been learning in my Hasidut shir in the morning and in the evening between me and my friends and my teachers? That was, select to a small privy of people. And I knew that it was a secret of teaching. And I didn't understand how this popular author had access to my Hasidic heritage and to my Hasidic tradition and philosophy. That was the frame. That was the frame of mind that I approached at the time. And then I realized that mysticism was not unique to Hasidut. It was a broader phenomena across Judaism, firstly, and not just restricted to Judaism, but a phenomena across the world's traditions. And it became very interesting to see this wave of being of mysticism as not something which was particularly unique simply to me and my form of Judaism, but something that was human, that all humans around the world had access to and had explored and had developed and had expressed through mythology and poetry and theology and philosophy in some very beautiful ways. And encountering those other traditions and those other formulations, I was able to understand something of my own tradition that I wasn't understanding up until then. And that led me down this second love, I could say, of beyond just the love of Hasidic mysticism, but the love of mysticism per se, experienced by humans across time, across cultures. And that's what I've been involved in for the last however many years.
Right. Is it like a lot of things, but something that it's interesting specifically that you say that in this journey to the broader mystic traditions, you learn something about your own like a mystic tradition, like Hasidut. What did you learn about you?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that the challenge of mysticism is in communicating it, right? Mysticism is defined by William James and many others. This I learned only later. I didn't learn this as a child. As something which is ineffable. It's actually which cannot be communicated, can't be spoken. So how do you communicate that which cannot be communicated, right? It's a great challenge. And there are many forms, many ways that we try to communicate it. We communicate it in attempts that are rational. In Chabad, for example, we communicate it through stories. Rabbi Nachman of Breslov, we communicate it through song, through nigun. This is a very big part of all within Hasidic mysticism, all these different modes of communication of how do we get these ideas across so that it touches people. And I think that a lot of the challenge of communication is still there. And part of the work of Hasidut, in contrast to Kabbalah, is about communicating Kabbalah to more people, to make that message more, to one which could be heard by more and more people.
And not only like the select,
not only the elite, exactly. And I think that work is work which is still happening. We're still trying to communicate it. And what Hasidut does to Kabbalah, we're trying again to do to Hasidut, to try to find a way to communicate it. I remember very clearly growing up, studying Hasidut, but to me it was still very abstract. It felt almost like, and those that have studied a bit of Kabbalah and Hasidut may understand this metaphor, it felt like there was like a plumbing system up in the skies that I was trying to learn the map, right? Which olam goes to which surah, which parsuf leads to which parts, and how does one thing influence the other, and which one is higher and which one is lower, and how does a lot of names, a lot of locations, but it wasn't something which I was able to at that time to internalize and to see it as my own internal journey. And this is what Hasidut tries to do to Kabbalah, to try and take this from just some sort of cosmic plumbing system of how the hashpa'ah, how the shefa, how the flux and vitality of God, of the infinite, reaches our mundane reality, to turn that into interiorized, into a human story of how do we move our own sefirot within us, how do we move from our states of inspiration to action, for example. But the penny wasn't quite dropping with me, and I was still, many hours as a teenager studying very difficult texts and not really getting it. And through being exposed to other forms of mysticism, I saw the same things try to be articulated in a very, very different language, very different register. And I was able to take out the elements of those articulations, leaving behind the cultural particularities, whether it's about Muhammad or the Buddha or Jesus. Those things I didn't see as relevant. But what was the core human journey that was being described, that was being articulated, and learning to see those things back in Hasidut. For example, Hasidut speaks a lot about bitul, about the nullification of the self, of the ego, in a way that leads to a state of dveikut, let's say, for example, a state of being cleaving with God, being one with God. And that's supposed to be a state that one can be in either in select moments, in a state of ecstasy, or in a constant state of the presence of God, this consciousness of God, God consciousness. But when those ideas were being articulated to me, bitul was seen as something which was like, you have to be less, you have to suppress yourself, you have to be more humble. And it wasn't being done, it wasn't being articulated in a positive or healthy way. And then when I was able to look at other traditions and see the metaphors that they were using for the same human process, whether it's in Islam, something like the process of fan'a, which leads to baqa, this annihilation of the self, the blowing out of the self in nirvana, that you blow out the wick, where you lose the illusion of a separate self, and that leads to a state of enlightenment, of the bodhisattva, of the one who's being awakened, the bodhi. Or in Christianity, the state of being, of having the self rot so that it can be resurrected, it can be refound in God. These metaphors, although they're coming from different cultures, they allowed me to see the language that I was being taught in Hasidut in a very new light. And for me, that was very helpful. And I think what I'm trying to do is to find those same articulations and try to articulate to people in each tradition what's actually going on in their systems based on a bit of a broader historical understanding of what these processes are.
Nice. I wanted to ask you now, so I also come like from a background of yeshiva, Haredi yeshiva, not Hasidic. So in my experience, I didn't learn at all mystic, no Hasidut, nor Kabbalah. I really wanted to, I couldn't. But I think like it was very difficult to expand my knowledge broader than the Talmud, the Gemara, and the four walls of the Halacha of the Jewish law. We couldn't dream about opening a book of not Jesus, not Buddha, not Sufism. I wanted to ask you, I wonder if it was difficult for you. I know in the Haredi world it would be like near to impossible. How was this experience for you in the Hasidic community, in the Chabad? Did you encounter like opposition from, if it's personally that should answer, maybe for your family, for your community, your rabbis, the other students? Did you do this stuff and in the yeshiva? Did you open like these books?
Right. So I was aware in my social context, and I wasn't interested in upsetting people. I was never rebellious. I was never doing this to upset anyone. I was never doing it because I had an agenda or like a bone to pick. I was doing it because I was simply curious and I was looking for understanding. And I exercised discretion of which books I would bring into the study hall and which books I would leave at home and keep private. There certainly were, teachers, my parents at points that were concerned with text that I was reading. But it happened over a long time and over a long exploration, and it was a very deep inner exploration, and it was one which I largely kept to myself, and I wasn't promoting ideas. I wasn't speaking about it widely. It was things that I was working through. There certainly were times where teachers were not happy with books that I was reading or with questions that I was asking, but there is a space within Judaism in general and within Orthodoxy and even ultra-Orthodoxy to ask questions. Mm-hmm. Judaism has a very high value on asking questions. We teach our children to ask questions.
The Talmud, the Gemara,
it's a book of debate, right? It's an entire, so we're a culture of sacred questioning in some senses. I think that for people, there's certainly a reaction where this is foreign and I don't want to touch it, and I don't want my child or my student to be touching it either. And that it's a visceral reaction, and I understand that reaction. And I think with time, when people see that a search or a journey is being done in a way it is not here to upset people, but it's being done in a way that's authentic, in a way that's meaningful, in a way that's respectful, then people embrace that. I know that my mother, for example, was not very happy that I had the Quran, the New Testament, the Bhagavad Gita in my bedroom. And
at which age? 15, 16?
Yeah, but in sort of my late teenage. And I told her that she should be more concerned that I have Kant and Schopenhauer and Nietzsche, but she was more worried about what was more obvious to as a religious, threat or other. But I have to say, like, to my parents' credit, they were very understanding of my own personal journey, and they supported it, and they encouraged me to seek for what was true to me. And there was definitely a bit of an awkwardness to overcome. But I think with time they came to see that the heart of my journey and quest was a pure one.
It wasn't against.
It wasn't against, exactly. I wasn't coming to rebel or to smash windows. I was simply coming to try and understand my own tradition better. And I don't think that journey is over. That journey very much continues. And there certainly have been people that have told me, this is foreign, you can't touch it, it's idolatry, it's avodah zarah. But I think most people, when they see a genuine search for truth, they respect that. And I think it has to be done respectfully, and it has to be done in a way that realizes that it may be a slight aberration from what students and children are usually, searching and asking about. But I would say overall, it's been an encouraged and supported and pleasant experience.
Did you encounter other, like, now you are very advanced in your research in your project of Seekers of Unity. Did you encounter, because of your videos, your teachings, maybe some yeshiva buffalo, some student of yeshiva, that it felt like this resonated with him, and maybe it helped him as you needed also this inner search? Maybe you also have others. Did you have this?
Yeah, 100%. It's been one of the things which has most given me energy to continue is hearing back feedback from people saying that, hi, like they email me or they'll message on Instagram or Twitter or comments on YouTube, and they'll say, I'm also on a similar journey and I have these questions, and there was no one who I could turn to. And you've created a space where it's okay to ask these questions, where there's resources or there's materials. In many ways, I'm trying to create something for the version of me that didn't have that place to turn to, that there was no one who I could turn to really and ask about Hegel and Buddha and Muhammad and connect it to Kabbalah. There was no one in that role model space for me, at least no one living. And I've been very, very touched by the amount of people from both within my own community, the Orthodox Jewish community, and from many other religions, that they feel that they grew up in a more, let's say, conservative or fundamentalist household, and are on an exploration into the contemplative, the mystical, the spiritual, and have found the channel and the community to be a great resource. To me, that's very, very meaningful. I think, and it's not just young people. I think it's also old people who grew up and left the community and didn't give it a chance, and then went on their own paths to try and find meaning and spirit, and never gave Judaism a second chance because the Judaism that they were exposed to was incredibly restrictive, incredibly closed off. And seeing a young Jewish-looking boy reopening these ideas, it's giving them permission, and for some of them that's been incredibly meaningful. It's incredible to think what you can do by sharing what you have with the world, and it's certainly challenging and a lot of work, but it's incredibly rewarding when someone says, I found a voice, I found peers that I feel that I can resonate with and I can connect with in my own deep spiritual search. And that's certainly been very rewarding, and it happens all the time. People reach out like that, and beginning to bring those people together, right? There's this vision from the prophets about the end of days of Atem to look to echad Beis Yisrael, that we have to go around and collect these people. And I see that work as very holy work. It was collecting the seekers one by one to bring them into community where these questions can be asked, and when there's a respect for this genuine search in a very open, what I hope is a beautiful way.
I think it's going to get a bit personal, but I also feel this inner need to explore, to ask myself questions, because my background was very, the yeshiva, very restrictive, very, sometimes it feel like a little bit naive, and philosophy, it wasn't an option. And when I tried to do this journey of exploring, I only encountered yes, philosophical responses, yes, but very against, maybe Jews that the way were Orthodox, and they explored in Nietzsche or in Kant and other religions, and they were like their main mission was to debunk Orthodoxy. And so I didn't want because to this continue this journey, because I also feel like need to keep in touch with my spirituality. But then I discovered your channel, and yes, it was like my reaction, like, Baruch Hashem, thank God, we can be Orthodox Jews and keep kosher and Shabbat and Tefillim, all the halacha, and also like ask ourselves questions. Maybe also like reading Nietzsche, reading Bhagavad Gita, and making these whole connections. So thank you.
It's my pleasure.
It helps a lot. That's to see that you have the option, and it's not against. You can be also Orthodox and also seek this unity. And so next, I wanted to understand a little bit more. What is the unity that is in the basis of Judaism, maybe Sufism, Christianity, Buddhism, maybe, and all these bunch of traditions that I never heard before? I saw your videos like Gnosticism.
Mm-hmm.
What is this unity that you're seeking, or you seek as of unity?
Correct.
So what is the unity?
It's a great question. What is the unity that we're seeking? It's hard to answer. I think sometimes when we peel away what's beneath it all, we come to more and more layers that need to be peeled. And I think there's something of a big question mark that stays there, because it is a mystery. It's the mysterium tremendum et fascinante, as Otto Rank put it. It's that which is truly mysterious. It's a true secret. The difference between a true secret and a false secret, and this is something that pops up in Hasidut and other philosophical traditions, is that a fake secret or an inauthentic secret is that once you've shared the secret, it's no longer a secret, which means that it's circumstantially a secret. It's a secret because it hasn't yet been shared.
This is a false secret.
This is a false secret. A true secret is one which is intrinsically, it's essentially a secret, which means even when you share it, it still remains a secret, because it's not dependent on whether it's been shared or not. It's inherently secretive. It's that which is fundamentally esoteric. So that's one side of it. I want to begin by saying that it is a mystery, and I don't think we can ever articulate, certainly not while we're alive in our bodies. You know, the biblical verse says, Lo yireni adam chai, that no human can see me and live. I think there are certain limitations that while we're in our present state of being, we cannot see the face of God. We cannot see to some extent. And yet, on the other hand, we know that Moses, for example, speaks to God face to face, right? So there's this paradox where there's both this great mystery that we cannot see, that it will destroy the categories of our being, it will eviscerate us entirely. But then there's also something that can be encountered, and so having first said that we can't say, now let's say what we can say. This is the apophatic and the cataphatic, that which we can't say, that which we can say.
Yeah, what is
the cataphatic and the apophatic? It's Greek terms that it's theology of what we cannot say about God, idiat hashlila and idiat hachiyuv. What can we say about this unity? What we can say is firstly that I think it's something that we do experience. It's something that we know, and something that we know in our deepest self. There's, I think, to frame it like this, there's a general sense that we have of reality. Mm-hmm. That reality is broken up. It's fragmented. It's fragmented into past and future and present, fragmented into here and there, the spatial separation, temporal separation. There's identity, there's my identity, which ends at a certain point. I'm not you, you're not me. This is a fragmented reality. This is what the Kabbalists call Alma de Pruda. It's the world of separation. And then there's a sense where that reality, that illusion, the helem, the illusion, the maya, can begin to fade away. And it can fade away for all kinds of reasons. It can happen through contemplation and meditation. It can happen through prayer. It can happen through in moments of love. It can happen in sport, in war, with psychedelics. It can happen in nature, where the sense that who we are is somehow expanded, somehow modified, and somehow mediated by something else, that there's something larger than us that we are participating in. There's something bigger than us, and that can mean that we're part of the ecosystem. We can feel ourselves melting into the forest. We're part of another person. If we're in love with someone, we can feel that where they end and we begins to be less defined. We can feel kindness toward a stranger where we feel that their well-being is our deepest concern. This is sometimes called an ego death, where the sense of self that we usually have begins to melt away. And in that, we encounter something very blissful and something which feels incredibly real and true, and feels truer than our ordinary reality. There's a verse in the book of Psalms that says that when the Messiah comes, we'll say about the days of exile like that we were like dreamers. That ordinary reality felt like a dream to us, and we've now woken up, we've been awakened. And that's the state of enlightenment, where we feel that what we thought was ourself is not really the self. And what we encounter in that dissolution boundaries is a sense of unity. And in that we have a sense of timelessness, right? There's a sense where things dilate and things move slower, where there's a moment which is present, which stretches out. This is what it says in the Talmud, that when the Messiah comes, these are all, I think, sort of coded references for the state of being, that there's Yom Shekli Aruch, there's this day which is infinitely long, that time itself begins to dilate and stretch apart, because time...
Shabbat, yeah.
That's right. Another way of framing that we move into a time of perfection, time of Shabbat. And I think this is the unity which we're seeking for. And I think that this unity is reality itself. And I think that in Judaism, we call this unity God, or Elohim, Yud-Kei Vav-Kei. In Islam, we call it Allah. In Buddhism, is a bit more complex because there's less of a positive formulation. It's more of a negative formulation of the emptiness of all being that's constantly, spontaneously arising, shunyata.
What was the name?
Shunyata is the emptiness. I think that in each tradition, humans are experiencing this reality, and they're seeing that this reality is really the most Ta'amuru Kitev Hashem, says King David in the Book of Psalms, that you can taste it and see it. In Islam, it's dawuk, to taste the reality and see that it's good, and see that is the blissful state of being that we want to be in. And that state of unity, I think, is what all the mystics are seeking. And they're in love with this unity. They're infatuated by it, and they want people to discover it for themselves. And I think that's the unity. And I think that we know what this unity is because we have intimations of it. We all have moments of that, where whether it's in a sunset, or whether it's being overcome by a phenomenal work of art or poetry, whether it's in a moment of religious ecstasy, the birth of a child, these incredible moments where we feel somehow that what we thought was reality is somehow a veneer, and beneath that lies a deeply interconnected being, and where all of reality is deeply, deeply interwoven and interdependent upon one another. One of the most beautiful metaphors in Hinduism is Idra's web. It's this cosmic, like spider's web that has these little jewels, these little drops of dew that have fallen upon it, and each one is deeply connected with one another. And I think this is the vision that the mystics move towards, and I also think that it's the vision which in many ways science is moving towards, of a deeply, deeply interconnected cosmos. And I think that's the unity which they strive for, the great mystery of reality.
I also heard in one of your videos about this quote of Einstein. I didn't know it was about of Einstein. It really seemed like of a mystic, of a religious rabbi or imam or something. And he speaks about this. Like, maybe you remember that quote? He
says that humans live under this great optical illusion of time and space that keeps us separate, and something, I don't know the exact words, but the most beautiful realization we can have is that this is an illusion, and beneath it all lies some sort of interconnected unity. I don't know the exact quote, but we can put it up on screen here. I think there's something which Einstein, a great scientist and I think a great mystic in this sense, sees that what lies beneath reality, beneath this illusion of separation, is a deep beauty and a deep love in which we are all connected. And Einstein sees it as the most important thing for humans to come to recognize. I should make a video on Einstein's mysticism. We'll speak about these ideas, put them in context. That quote is a really beautiful one. I should memorize it. I should learn it by heart.
So this is like the objective of your project of Secrets of Unity, like searching the element of the basic unity that connects all the mystical paths traditions in order to create this more caring world?
Yes, I see the mystics as people throughout history who have experienced this and who have pointed to it and have written about it and sung about it and danced about it. And I want to be an ear to them, to hear what they have to say and try to find a way both for myself to embody that and to experience it and to live in that state of kindness and unification, and find a way to articulate that and to use my particular gift, having been brought into the Hasidic community, to try and articulate that to the Hasidic community and through the Hasidic community, to share a lot of the global conversation of mysticism has been missing a Jewish voice in that conversation for specific historical and technical reasons. The Jewish voice has been missing, and I'd like to play a small role to bring that voice back. And there are many who are, to bring Jewish mysticism into a global conversation. I think that's the ultimate goal of religion, and I think that's the goal of life, is to live in that state of unity, to live in that state of oneness with the divine. And it's what I strive to do. It's what I believe that I was taught to strive to do as a young child. That every action that we do, it brings us closer to a state of, to be quote, the state of nearness to God. And I'm just trying to find new language and new inspiration and new stories to tell, to try and move myself and move those around me closer to that unity.
I think it's a very important point, because a lot of religious people, especially Orthodox people, not everyone, but I met a bunch of them, that the more religious, the more Orthodox they are. It could be Judaism, Islam, or Christianity. They are more fanatic and more against each other. My religion is the best one,
right,
and you are wrong.
Right.
We're going to heaven and you're going to hell.
Right.
And they even justify violence within the religious. And if at the end of the day, there is a unity with me, with God, but it can't be a unity with me and God if I am not united with you, I think.
Yes.
So I think this is the articulation of the idea that brings this caring world, isn't it?
Brings
this caring world.
Yes.
Reality.
Yeah. I think it's an unfortunate reality. It's a bit of an absurd reality that people that take their religion very seriously take that as a cause to hurt one another. And I think there's something very tragic in that. I think that if we believe in even before we get to mysticism, even just in basic theism, if we believe in one God, then we're all children of that one God. And the last thing that a parent wants to see in the world is their children fighting. And for us to fight one another in the name of our parent God, I think is a terrible, tragic irony. If it wasn't so painful, it would be humorous at how absurd it is. And I think stepping even, but that's even just with theism. When we move beyond theism to mysticism, the difference between the theist and the mystic in this context is the theist says there is a God, there is one God, and the mystic says there is nothing but God. Ein od milvado. There is nothing. Everything that you see is only God.
It's not one God in terms of quantity, one and not many. One in the sense of the whole reality.
Correct. Yes.
This is the meaning of Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu.
This is how the mystics read Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu. This is how the Jewish mystics read that verse, that God is not only one amongst many, or one without any other, but one, that they read the verse, for example, in V'yodatem hayom b'shivot Elohecha ki Hashem Elokim ein od milvado, right? That there's none other but God. Not that there are none other gods but God, but there's nothing else at all in existence. All of existence is God. The mystics, some of them even say, when they're being a bit more provocative, that God does not exist. God is existence, right? God is the very grounds of being. There's no being but God. To say that God exists is to put God in the category of one exists. God exists and the cup exists and the table exists. They say no. God is all of existence itself. God is the ground of being, to use a philosophical terminology. And therefore, on that conception, right, not only are we all children of God, but we're all literally a part of God, and a part of the infinite, according to mathematics, itself is finite. This is what Hasidut says, that etzem, something that's essential, when you grab onto any part of it, you're grabbing onto the entire thing. Etzem, kshatatofes b'miktzatoa, tatofes b'kula, and therefore every aspect of reality is the divine in its totality. And this is a great paradox. But when we have this in our mind and we approach a co-religionist or a fellow from another religion, we can only see in them the face of God. Anything else would be a denial of our deepest beliefs.
Okay. And then I ask myself, if at the end of the day, like everything is one, every tradition, every mystic path, every religion is one, so why keep being Jewish? Why keep being an Orthodox Jewish that observes the Shulchan Aruch? Maybe I can be a Sufi or a Hindu or a Buddhist. Like, maybe the question is this the question, and what is? Yes, we have the unity, but we also have the contingent, like cultural differences, religious differences. So why keep being Jewish, and what is the difference? What is the special, maybe, perception of the unity from the Jewish perception?
Yeah. So let's try tease out those two different questions there. Let's try answer them separately. To take the first question first, I think the reason why we still try to reach the unity from our particularity, from our own vantage point, is the very reason why God, in some sense, using this word as the mystics use it, brings reality into existence. Think about this for a second. Before anything existed, what did we have? We had God's undifferentiated unity, right? If that's the ultimate goal, then why did anything else need to come into creation? Why is there a world? Why did God create the world according to Genesis in 6 days and rest on the seventh? God should have just rested. He, she, it, that which is beyond any gender and any categories of being itself, time and space, simply was. The unity was there. So why create anything? And the answer, the very beautiful answer that the mystics give across traditions, is that there's something lacking in that undifferentiated unity. And what's lacking is differentiation. What's lacking is the beauty that comes with difference and complexity and otherness. And the new unity that we're striving for, plain unity was already there. The new unity that we're trying to get to is a more beautiful unity, a unity which includes multiplicity, which includes diversity, which includes otherness. If we were to come to the mystical experience with a bitul, with an eradication of self that left nothing of the self at all, that would be a tragedy, because then we would be a wasted creation. God creates you with your personality, with your own humor and your own taste, your own dislikes, your beautiful way of being. And if that is to be eradicated, and part of that means that you're a Jew, part of that means that you have your cultural heritage, where you come from, and if you're to eradicate that, then all we're doing is we're getting back to the unity that existed before creation. And we want something better this time. We want a unity that brings all of our particularity into that unity. It's a unity in diversity. And it's a unity which doesn't contradict diversity. And it's a diversity which doesn't contradict unity, but one that flows together in this beautiful, beautiful mosaic of faces that make up the one face of God. It's why we speak our particular languages. We don't all, melt down into one Tower of Babel universal language, because then we've lost the beauty of Yiddish and French and Arabic and Spanish and German. There's something beautiful about having the different languages, but we still have to learn how to speak to one another. We still have to learn how to communicate, and we can still find universal languages that we can speak, but without eradicating our difference. So I think that's how I would answer the first question of what does it mean to do it from our own place. And I think it's so important to do it from where we are. There's this fantasy sometimes that the grass is greener on the other side, that if we run across the world, if we try out a different language and culture and religion and cuisine, then we'll find the peace that we were looking for. The reality is that if we believe that in every single tradition, the unity lies at its heart and core, then wherever we are and whatever religion we find ourselves for good reason, that is where we should dig in our own backyards. And I'm a very, very big advocate of that. The second question is what is the particular addition to this story of unity that Judaism brings? What is the unique Jewish contribution to mysticism? And I think that's a very good question. And that's a beautiful question, because it now opens up a new conversation of not who's better than one another and who has the truth and do we need to kill everyone else? Are they going to hell? These are childish questions as far as I'm concerned. A beautiful question is, we see all these beautiful traditions trying to reach a shared unity, a beautiful state of peace and balance and equanimity. Then the question is, what does each one in particular have to contribute uniquely to the conversation? What is the genius of the Jewish mystic, of the Christian mystic, of the Hindu or the Buddhist, etc.? And I think there are many ways to answer this question. I think the answer will change throughout history because these religions continue to grow and develop and evolve. I think the one which speaks most poignantly to me right now in this moment is that Judaism teaches a form of mysticism which is highly, highly embodied and lived within a very rich, interwoven communal life. I'm going to make a bit of generalizations here that wouldn't fly in an academic piece of research, but for sake of conversation, they're good pointers to start with, and they hold true from a bit of a zoomed out, let's say, perspective. In most mystical traditions, the mystic separates from the community. They're typically celibate. There's a lot of asceticism where they're fasting and they're deriving themselves of the world and bodily pleasure. They will not have a family and wife and children. They won't be engaged in business. They'll be separate from the community, and some more than others. And we do have aspects of this in Judaism. I know there is as well. But by and large, in other traditions, the mystic is one who separates themselves from the community. We have an idea in Judaism of the parush, the person who is separated literally. That's what the word means, from the community. But what's more the case in Judaism, the parush is the exemption. It's only a few characters in classic rabbinic history who do not get married on principle and who remain celibate and who engage with deep asceticism. More so the case is that the mystic in Jewish mysticism is one who is deeply, deeply involved in communal and family life. They are people that are married, they are people with children, they are people that are engaged with the needs of the community, they are people who are figures and leaders who are responding to the social, political, economic needs of their surroundings. They're people that are deeply, deeply engaged with this world. And I think that part of the reason why is because Judaism sees this world as the place of God's presence. This world is where God walked around in paradise before Adam and Eve kicked God out of the garden, right? Exactly. This notion that God begins here in this reality and God ends here, which means that the unity begins and ends here in the terrestrial, in the mundane, in the everyday. I'm not saying that Judaism, that this is the truth of Judaism and that no one else understands this. This is a complex point, and there are many Jewish mystics who will disagree with this articulation. There are many mystics and other Christians who will agree with it. I'm just saying on a bird's eye view, something of a unique, let's say, Jewish contribution to the conversation is how to live a mystical life in an ever-present reality. Not in a need to escape reality, but in a way that we can be deeply living in our day-to-day. How can we take the mitzvot of Judaism, which occupy us from the moment we breathe our first breath as a child till we breathe our very last breath, all the way through? How can those all be moments of connection, of inspiration, of kindness, of intimacy, without needing to run away from reality? And to me, that stands as a real moment of Jewish genius that's been cultivated and worked and articulated and re-articulated throughout the generations.
So this reminds me about the Hasidic concept of the Shov, like the running and the returning. And I always understand it. I don't think it's correct or not, or you can correct me, that this is like a genuine thing of Judaism. Like the idea that we don't want to escape this world, where we don't want to eliminate the physical realm. We want to bring like God into this physical world. Is it so unique, or isn't it?
I'll tell you, mysticism as a universal phenomena is very, very complex and very diverse. And even within one specific tradition, there's so much going on that it would take many lifetimes just to study. I mean, all of we say these words as if they're one thing, but there's so much going on. Within Hinduism, you have yoga and bhakti and jhana and karma. There's like so much going on. Entire lineages and different teachers and different. Think about in Hasidut, right? We say Hasidut as if it's one thing, and you know that there are dozens of different schools and dynasties, and it's a complex conversation of what connects them and what divides them. So the notion of an exit from the world and a return to the world, or an exit towards God and a return to the world, these are ideas which do pop up in other mystical traditions. There's a very famous articulation of this in Neoplatonism of how all of reality exits from the one and returns to the one. These are complex ideas. Within Gnosticism, sometimes a term which is complex and not so clear in the scholarship what that term means even. There's some trends. This is already identified by people like Evelyn Underhill of some Gnostic traditions which are more negative towards the world and some which are more embracing of the world. I think that it's hard to say what's happening in totality and if something is totally unique. I think it's easier to speak about what are the sort of the dominant patterns that emerge within traditions. And I think that, firstly, even within Judaism, there are articulations which see the world as a fallen place, and that the only purpose of this world is just to be a corridor to the real world, to Olam Haba. I think it's easier sometimes to speak about broad patterns of what do we see emerging, what are the attitudes that emerge within traditions, and their relationship to the world. There is certainly a very world and life embracing element in Judaism, as we've been saying. There is certainly a very world and life embracing element in Judaism, as we've been saying, and one which develops throughout time. I see similar moves being made in very late stage Zen and Mahayana and Rinzai Buddhism, where the world itself becomes the place of the absolute in some senses. It's a bit hard to answer if something is entirely unique or not.
So in this conception, which tradition, mystical religion, would you say that it resembles more Judaism?
I think it depends from what perspective, right? It depends on what was the point of comparison that we're making. I think that when you read the Sufis, for example, there's a shared. Firstly, when you read the Abrahamic Islam,
viewers that don't know what is Sufism.
One of the primary mystical traditions within Islam. There are other forms within Islam,
like the Kabbalah of the Judaism is Sufism for Islam.
Yes, that would be a fair comparison. Yeah. I think that you find more commonality amongst, let's say, the Abrahamic faiths, the faiths of the book, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, because they're working with a shared cultural and linguistic textual matrix. They're working with the Tanakh, right? Mm-hmm. In their different forms of it, and I think you're going to find more commonality amongst them. I think that particularly within Islam and Judaism, because there's a very high premium placed on an absolute monotheism, where Christianity has a bit more space for plurality of different persons within the Godhead. I think you find a lot of similarities between Islam and Christianity, and they've also been interacting historically with one another more than Eastern traditions have been interacting with the West. But I think fundamentally, and this is a challenging thing to say, particularly in an academic setting, but I think fundamentally, beyond all the cultural differences and differentiations, I think there is a deep unity which combines them all. And I think there's a dance or a balance to both find that which is the common and to hold on to that which is the particular and the unique. And that's a lot of the dancers between those two poles.
We've talked about this new topic, a new idea for my viewers, I think. It is not only Kabbalah, not only Hasidut, but what is the relationship between Judaism, Jewish mysticism with the rest of the spiritual paths. Also, the name of the channel is Tikkun Olam, so I think it's very important to make this very clear that at the end of the day, we are like one humanity, Shechem Echad. Also, it's written in the Nevi'im that we crave like the unity for the humanity with God. So this is important. I wanted to finish asking you, what do you think are the challenges of this modern secular society from a spiritual point of view? And maybe another question, how can spirituality, mysticism, specifically Jewish mysticism, Kabbalah, Hasidut, benefit this modern and alienated world?
Yeah. I think it's a very important moment that we live in. And I think that there's a potential for a very deep encounter between mysticism, spirituality, and contemporary modernity, the secular modern world that we live in. I think that there's a lot of beauty in secularity, and many of the great mystics, both in Judaism and other traditions, have seen the modern moment, the modern secular moment, as a very rich moment. It's a moment which no longer emphasizes the coercion of religion, right? You don't have to believe what your parents believed or what your country believed just because they believed it. There's no power over you that says you must believe in X, Y, and Z. There's an autonomy, there's a freedom to choose of what we're going to be, how we're going to choose. And the mystics, Jewish mystics and other mystics, see that this moment of autonomy, of freedom of choice, as a reflection of the divine freedom, right? God is free to choose. God creates freely. God does not have anything on top of God. And because we're in the image of God, we're now reflecting that, where we have the autonomy to choose ourselves as well. Rav Kook, for example, a modern mystic who was the chief rabbi of Israel, first chief rabbi of Israel, spoke about how the modern notion of secularism and atheism is part of a great tikkun, part of a great rectification that religion itself needs to go through to come to its own truth, to move away from a discourse of coercion, of forcing, of hegemony, of power, to one of freedom and choice and a liberated form of religion. The mystic who most influenced me in my own spiritual journey, my spiritual mentor, my Rebbe, Rabbi Menachem Schneerson of Chabad, spoke about how the move from the old world, from Europe to the new world of America, was a move from tyranny and from coercive forms of religion to a place of autonomy, of freedom, where the individual could be whoever they want, however they wanted. And it's in that space that there's a great capacity to choose. We were speaking before about how Judaism is a very optimistic form of mysticism. It sees the world as a beautiful place, as a garden. There's a very famous line that the Jewish mystics hold very dear from Jewish literature, which is that that everything that was created in the world was created for the honor of God, the glory of God, for the glory of the unity that is, right? So why was gold created in the world? Gold was created so that it could be used in the tabernacle and in the temple, in the Mishkan and the Beit HaMikdash. So anything that emerges with modernity, the internet, technology, all these things which can be real challenges, and they are challenges, can also be used for the glory of God, which means for the sake of unity and a greater understanding and greater kindness and peace. I think that what we're doing here is a great demonstration of that. The internet, YouTube, podcasts, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook can be used for division, for alienation, for hatred, for otherness, for superiority, for disinformation. It can be used for harmful and hurtful things, or it can be used for a positive. It can be used to inspire, to connect. There's no moment in human history which is more ripe for a messianic global redemption, for a revolt of love and unity than this present moment, where a voice can be heard across the world in an instant. The capacities, the technologies that we have, they're the sword which cuts both ways. They're what the Kabbalists call the klipat noga. It's the shell which can be used either to hold something holy or hold something the opposite of that. And I think that exactly where the challenge lies, that's where the opportunity lies. In technology, in the freedom, in the self-determination that defines our present moment, that can either lead to depression, to nihilism, to bigotry, to hatred, or that very same technology can be used to deeply connect us, to unite us, to bring us into conversation. How are we speaking with one another because of the power of those technologies? Mm-hmm. And it's those same technologies which can be used in either direction. And I think that it's upon us who live in this incredible moment to see what we have at our fingertips and to use it to bring people together, to promote love and kindness and a message of unity. And I think that the wisdom of the past, and there's a lot to unpack about what wisdom from ancient traditions can the modern world take. I think there's a lot, but one of them is perhaps let's talk about what Judaism has to offer. We're talking about Judaism as an embodied way of living in community. People today live in more loneliness and isolation than ever before in history. People, they say that people see a close friend 50% less than they would see in previous decades, right? Youth suicide rates are up through the roof because people are lonely and alienated and isolated. I think that Judaism and Jewish mysticism forces us into community, into a minyan, into a chavraya, into a chavruta, into conversation, into dialogue, in many ways. Anyone who understands the practice of Judaism, particularly as mediated through Kabbalah and Hasidut, understands how it forces us into community, into mindfulness, into presence. I think there's an entire series to be made on what can be taken from Jewish mysticism, from mysticism more broadly speaking, to be brought to the present moment. And I think part of the work that we're doing here is to create those bridges, the bridges between the past and the present, between the religious and the secular, between the self and the other, between the abstract and the concrete. These are really, we're only here like opening little teaser trailers to all of these directions. But I think part of this moment is to see the dangers as possibilities and to see how we can return to be in connection with one another, as opposed to letting technology and modernity drive us in isolation and separation, how can those things drive us together? And I think that once we start thinking, we'll find some pretty available creative ways to make that happen.
In a show this past week, I also was speaking about the potential of the technology. And I told them, maybe the Mashiach, the Messiah, what do you think? He won't have like a YouTube account, a TikTok, or Instagram? Because really, this is the possibility to reach the whole humanity, as you said, with pressing one button. I think I see this like a very material construction of the spiritual Geula.
Yeah.
But you spoke about the unity and community. But I wonder, do we have like, do we need mysticism for this? Like also like secular people, they can also bring this message of unity and being together and community. But I see like mysticism like this perception of another world, another reality, spirituality. Do you think this also can resonate with young people, especially young secular atheist people that they don't believe in this realm? What do you think?
Right. I think, no, you're right that there are many secular ways to come into community. And there's a whole like new movement of atheistic churches, of people that will gather to share humanistic values. They'll gather on a Sunday to talk about gratitude or talk about kindness, and then you certainly don't need to believe in God to believe in the power of community or the power of gratitude, for example. Sports, I think, is a really great way where people are uniting together, which is not religious in a theistic or classical sense. I think what mysticism adds to the extra layer of depth that it adds to community is precisely not that it's another world, that we're escaping our world to a different world. I think that mysticism in its finest reveals to us this world. It brings us into this place that we are here. The Kabbalists speak about Olam Haba, the world to come, but ultimately it's a return to where we are right now, to open our eyes to the reality of what is. And I think that there is something that appeals to the secular modern mind about that, because we understand that with contemporary science, we can see a world which doesn't seem to be ordered or doesn't seem to have patterns or coherence, and we can come up with equations, with mathematics, with physics that explain a coherence and interconnectedness about our reality itself, and reveal to us something beautiful about something that we were seeing all the time but never actually saw. So I don't think that we're talking about doing an escapist project or running away from the world. I think that mysticism is trying to show us the world as it is. And I think that people are open to that. I think that part of the popularity and success of a lot of pop culture, things like The Matrix, which was about peeling back the illusion that separates us to see what's actually going on. And what's actually going on, I don't think is something evil and nefarious. I think it's something very beautiful and interconnected. That's my hope, at least. There are some mystics that have more negative visions of what's actually going on, but we'll focus on the positive. And I think that what that adds to community, to a secular community, is not just the sense that we are separate beings that are ontologically distant and separate from one another, that we can never actually come into contact with one another in a deep subjective way. We're always trapped in our own bubble, but we can choose to put those bubbles next to each other and be in community. That's like let's say a modern conception of community based on the metaphysics of separation and alienation. I think what mysticism does, it pops that bubble. It says that your deepest subjectivity is not alienated in a metaphysical way from the subjectivity of someone else, that there is a place where those can meet, when they can melt into one another, where the other person, when you can feel the other person's pain and happiness and sorrow and delight. And that, I think, is taking community and putting it on steroids, putting it to the next level. It's adding a metaphysical component where you're actually coming into a metaphysical communion with the other person. And this is something that religion teaches in a way that's missed, but is very profound. In Christianity, for example, they speak about how the Christian church, is the body of Jesus. They are one body. In Judaism, we speak about how the Jews are part of one soul. There is the soul of Knesset Yisrael, of the gathering of Israel, that are part of one very soul. And I think that element of community is deeper than just a community of separate egos that happen to be bumping into each other. It's a community of a shared consciousness, a shared body, a shared soul. And I think that is not only possible, but is very appealing, I think, to the modern person. And I think that we're seeing the directions in which that is opening up, particularly in a secular space, through things like music, through things like psychedelics, through things like love, where that sense of deep community is seen as possible.
Yeah. How do you do this? How do you teach them? How do you also us? It's not only them. How do I teach myself how to experience this unity? Because as you said right now, the psychedelics, the drugs, I think it's like a very appealing way for the person that wants a quick, how do you say?
A quick fix, a shortcut.
To arrive into this unity, but I don't think that it's the right way. How can we do this like in a proper way, gradual, healthy way?
Yeah.
How can, it's a very basic question, but how can you experience this unity?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think that there are generally speaking three components of this, which is something which I think is important to hold in picture. There's the experience, there's the theory, and there's the practice, right? So the experience is that moment of dissolving into the one, of feeling the unity, feeling that bliss and love, which takes many shapes and forms. The theory is what are the stories that we tell ourselves as humans to explain and make sense and communicate that experience. And it's important to have a theory of mysticism, to have a metaphysics which explain this, to make sense of it so that it's rational, so that it's grounded. And whether that's through Spinoza or the Alter Rebbe or Nagarjuna or Ibn Arabi, to have or a scientific formulation of it. I have a friend, John Raveki, is articulating now, with the help of cognitive science, a rational scientific approach to understand the mystical, to have a model. Narratives, stories for children, for adults even, stories are very powerful. That's a theory, and it's important to have a theoretical framework and construct. There's also the practices. Practices are two sides. They're both the practices, the techniques that we practice and have been practiced for millennia to invoke that experience. These are things like song, dance, prayer, meditation, contemplation, pilgrimage, walking, charity. These are the practices that we do as humans that affect us physiologically, that affect our body. We're in bodies, right? And they work on our bodies to bring us, to open us up, to purify us for that illumination, for that experience. And each tradition has its own set of practices, and I recommend people ideally sticking to one tradition. Find one tradition. And if that tradition does it through the practice of the body, through yoga, then good. If it's a Hasidic practitioner who does that through purification in water, in mikvah, and then through prayer, through incantation, through word, through Torah, then do that. Find one tradition and see what the practices are and stick to those practices. And part of that also is how do we relate to the world around us? We have to begin to act as if it's true, right? We have to begin to be kind to the stranger because they're not actually strangers, and that's part of. And I think that when we have...
You don't have to wait to feel this.
No. You don't have to wait. You don't have to wait at all. I think you begin to do the action. You begin to do the practice. You begin to practice the ethic as if it was true. And you begin to work out a construct, a theory of why it makes sense. And then that invites the experience. The mystics never chased, the great mystics never chased experience. They kind of laughed off experience. Because experience can become a pursuit of ego, can become a pursuit of narcissism. It can be narcissism. It can just be another form of hedonism, of pleasure. The mystics wanted reality itself. And there's many great mystics who toned down mystical experience because they wanted the core, which is beyond the experiential.
And how, I don't understand, how can they access the core if they don't experience it? Well, only in the theory, do you?
No. Because the core goes beyond experience. Because experience is predicated on a separation, that there is an experiencer and there's that which is being experienced.
Yeah.
This is a point that Plotinus makes, that even when there's experience to be spoken of, he speaks of the non-experience. There's the Alter Rebbe Shneur Zalman of Liadi says that I don't want your Gan Eden, I don't want your mystical experiences, I want to be in deep relationship with you alone, he says. There's a great Sufi mystic, I believe it was Attar, who has there's a series of temptations that he's presented with, and they begin with very basic, and then they get more and more spiritual. And he's tempted with an experience of God. He says, I don't want an experience of God. I don't want an experience of unity. I just want Allah alone. I want you alone. And that sense of I think in today's day and age, people are chasing the mystical experience. Everyone wants a fun experience, something they can share on Instagram. They want to, have a unique experience. And the mystics actually say, don't be chasing experience. You're making a mistake. Be chasing the way of being that's filled with kindness and compassion and love, and look for an understanding, a wisdom of how to live your life in accordance with that principle. The experience will come or won't come. That's less important.
Well, so we have to, sorry because of the English, but you have like to be this unity. You have to, how to say it, to make it real, the physical world, and then the experience will come. Don't chase like that feeling.
Correct.
Of the unity.
Correct.
Act as everything is one, and then the experience may will come.
Yeah,
but it's not the objective.
It's not the objective at all. And listen, I have a lot of very sweet, kind friends that have had a lot of mystical experiences. Some with substances, some without, and not all of them have worked to incorporate it, to embody it, to bring it into who they are. And then I have a lot of friends who never had a mystical experience per se, but they're deeply kind and giving, and they live as if these truths are true. And to me, I would prefer to see a world of that second type of people more than the first type of people, because we can become junkies with experience. And I think it's really not so important.
Yeah. Like this is, you have the element of the ego that, as you said, that why are you seeking this experience, this mystical experience? Do you want it because you want the tikkun olam, in English, the
rectification,
of our world, to experience the unity with another, to be more altruistic, or because of you want to write something, post something on Instagram, you want to say, tell everyone how mystic you are,
right,
how spiritual advanced you are. At the point you have like lost the way, I think.
Yeah, I think so. There's a great line from Alan Watts, who was a famous spiritual teacher of the 60s and 70s. He said that when you hear the message, you hang up the phone. You don't stay on the phone the whole time. So the message is how we can be living this life, how we can be embodying it. The phone is the medium. The medium is the experience, but you don't stay on the phone the entire time, or else you never get a chance to carry out the message. Mm-hmm. So we have to hear the message, put down the phone, and then begin to practice it.
To close up the video, the interview, I heard you you told that everyone has to seek their own path, their own tradition. Do you have like maybe one particular simple idea for everyone that right now they can practice this unity, not in order to seek this mystical experience, in order to be the unity, in order to be this altruistic human person? Do you have like one tip?
Yeah, I have something which works, I think, across traditions, and it's quite easy to do. It is to take a time of your day or of your week, and instead of dedicating that time to yourself, to dedicate that time to someone else. And that could mean any form. It could mean dedicated to visiting your grandmother. It could mean dedicated to helping in a shelter to pack food for the hungry. It could mean spending time in your community garden to help with the compost. It could mean spending time to be engaged with whatever project, whatever person, whatever it is. There's someone in the world that has less than you, that is more in a place of need than you, and to be able to give from our own time to them, to that person or to those people, is a very big gift. It's a gift to them, but it's a bigger gift to us, because what we do in those moments are, firstly, we can be in a place of gratitude. We realize how lucky we are that we're able to be there. We're healthy. We're capable. We have the means. We have the time. We have the energy to be able to help someone else. And what we realize, and this is a point that the Jewish mystics say, that when we do an act of kindness for someone else, an act of volunteering for someone else, we realize that with our action, we're telling ourselves that we're not here just for ourselves. We're not just our ego. We're here as part of something bigger. When we give charity, for example, says the Alter Rebbe, the founder of the mystical lineage that I belong to, when we give literal money to charity to someone else, what we're saying is that money, which could have gone into my body with food that turns into blood, that turns into life, I'm now giving that life to someone else. And by doing that, I'm saying that my life is bigger than just me. And he connects it very, very beautifully to the Talmudic idea, which is that tzedakah tatil mimavet, that charity, which is a weird word for tzedakah. Tzedakah really means justice. It's the just thing to do, the right thing to do. An act of justice, of giving to someone else, saves us from death, which could be read in kind of a magical way, that there was a decree that you were going to die and gave charity and now you're not going to die. He says, no, very literally, that charity, tzedakah, eradicates death. Why? Because when you identify with the bigger picture, and you're doing that in your action, you're putting your money where your mouth is, or with time, or with kindness, what you're saying to being itself, that I'm not just isolated in my body, in my ego, in this sack of bones and skin, but I'm part of something bigger, and that bigger thing is eternal, right? And that's why charity saves from death. So my advice to a lot of people that reach out is to find time to spend volunteering for someone else, to give to someone else, to be in the place of giving and not just taking. Because when we live in a life of giving, it invites a very deep mystical beauty and kindness and peace into our lives. And I think that's applicable for the Jew, for the Christian, for the atheist, for the Buddhist. I think it's applicable for everyone.
It sounds very much like the Messianic era, like the idea of the Mashiach. The question is, we don't have to wait for the Messiah, the Mashiach, to come and transform our consciousness. We have to be the ones who change it.
Yes.
Who adopt this conscious of unity, of empathy. Is this right?
Yes.
Mystical point of view?
Yes. This is how the mystics read the Tanakh. They read the Bible. That the prophecy of the watchman who's asked, when is the morning coming? And he answers, the morning comes when we strive to create it. This is what the Baal Shem Tov answers the Messiah when he ascends to the chamber of the Messiah. He says, when is the master coming? And he says, when you do the work of spreading this message to the world, that we don't wait for Mashiach, we don't wait for the Messianic era, we make it happen. The morning comes because we strive to make it happen. We are the ones who are Ariyah Shachar. We call the sun to rise in our actions, and we make it happen.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
And yeah, I think it's the best message to finish this video. Entonces, bueno, muchas gracias a todo el mundo. Thank you for everyone. Si queréis saber más sobre el proyecto de Zevi, de Seekers of Unity, los buscadores de la unidad, tenéis la descripción del vídeo aquí abajo el enlace a su canal de YouTube, así que sin dudar, ir a verlo. Y muchas gracias a todos. Nos encontramos en el siguiente vídeo. Shalom.
Like a bird on a tree, I'm just sitting here. I got time, it's clear to see.